you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, members of the press. And today, being the great day for us to converge here to get the current progress of our economic performance, I'm much delighted to meet new and happy faces in the room, indicating new advancement and resilience in our great nation, Kenya. My headlines today shall deeply dwell on impacts of protracted drought and high inflation rates in our economy. And it's my due hope that there will be consideration from the national government through respective county governments across our country. Across Kenya, ladies and gentlemen, acute food insecurity remains elevated due to the impacts of drought on multiple below-average crop and livestock production seasons and high inflation. In August 2022, Kenya's annual inflation rate hit a 5-year high of 8.3%, driven by food, transport, and fuel prices. At the same time, the government ended the maize subsidy program that had been awarded to 129 millers to lower food maize flour prices to 100 Kenyan shillings, which is equivalent to $0.83 US. Maize flour prices have now risen to more than 200 Kenyan shillings, which is equivalent to $1.06 US per 2 kg packet, which is the highest in 5 years. As a result, ladies and gentlemen, access to food is constrained among poor households given stagnant wages in urban areas and shrinking income earning opportunities in the same rural areas. In the pastoral areas as well, livestock productivity is minimal due to the drought, resulting in very low household food and income. In July 2020, this year, the goat to maize terms of trade was around 20 to 65% below the 5-year average, driven by high stable food prices and low livestock prices. With casual labor or self-employment, as well as the cash or in-kind food substance via the government safety nets and humanitarian aid, despite this, food consumption gaps, the use of livelihood coping strategies, and acute malnutrition rates are consistent with emergency. In the marginal agricultural areas, ladies and gentlemen, crisis and stress outcomes persisted in August the same year, amid significant losses in household food availability and low incomes from crop production, crop sales, and agricultural wage labor. Ladies and gentlemen, the severity of acute food insecurity is spotted highest in Kitui, Makueni, Meru North, and Tharaka-Nithi counties. The Famine Early Warning System Network is regularly assessing the risk of famine due to extreme drought in the Horn of Africa. Based on outcome analysis using the household economy analysis approach in Kenya's northern and northwestern pastoral livelihood zones, as well as the National Drought Management Authority Sentinel site, the Famine Early Warning System Network currently assesses that the famine is not a credible alternative scenario in Kenya through the January 2023, given the critical availability of household income from the labor management activities, and government, and also the government and humanitarian assistance. However, ladies and gentlemen, it must be emphasized that emergency outcomes are associated with increased acute malnutrition and mortality are still extremely concerning. Ladies and gentlemen in the room, furthermore, if food assistance declines or if household income shrinks significantly more than anticipated, the number of households in catastrophe will likely to increase. Ladies and gentlemen, bearing in mind with the current situation in Kenya, the rainfall performance, great citizens, the June to September rainy seasons in Western Kenya has been mixed following the below average March to May 2022 long rains. Most of the Western Kenya region, the Nyanza region, and parts of Kilifi and Kwale counties have recorded more than 10 millimeters above average rainfall, while the most of Turkana, Lamu, Southern Garissa, the Central Rift Valley, and Central Kenya have recorded cumulative rainfall deficits of 25 to 100 millimeters. Brethren, in particular, Northern Turkana has received only 45 to 60% of the 40-year average, while in Western Kenya has recorded cumulative rainfall of 25 to 50% of the long-term average. In the pastoral areas, the dry season is in progress and most areas have received the little to no rainfall since early May 2022. In terms of food production in this country, according to the Ministry of Agriculture and Field reports, maize crops in the medium and high potential production areas of Western Kenya and the South and Northern Rift Valley are in good conditions and at the maturing and harvesting stages, having received average to above rainfall. However, the maize production is expected to be 10 to 15% below the 5-year average due to the late onset of rainfall and irregular distribution of rainfall throughout the season. In the marginal agricultural areas, most households have depleted their own produced food stocks due to the below average long rains, production and lack of carryover stocks for the previous below average short rain season. And as a result, ladies and gentlemen, most households remain typically reliant on market food purchases. However, that indicates that households in Lamu have food stocks following a significantly above average long rains harvest, while in Kwale and Kilifi, the ongoing harvesting of maize, green grams, and cowpeas is gradually improving households' food stocks. Additionally, ladies and gentlemen, the National Drought Management Authority Sentinel cites data. Poor marginal agricultural households continue to face income deficits due to below average crop sales and limited agricultural wage labor opportunities following the consecutive below average production seasons. As a result, poor households have below average purchasing power, which is constraining market food purchases. In terms of livestock production, livestock body conditions, particularly in cattle, are poor across most pastoral areas due to limited access to pasture, water, and the health care to the livestock. According to the satellite-derived normalized difference vegetation index, Vegetation greenness across much of the country is less than 80% of the 2012 to 2021 average, particularly in northwestern, northern, northeastern, and southern country. The unseasonably low pasture availability continues to drive widespread livestock migrations across the pastoral areas. According to the National Drought Management Authority Sentinel site data, for July, the livestock trekking distances across most pastoral areas are 11 to 17 kilometers compared to 8 to 13 kilometers normally. While in Mandera and Marsabit, livestock trekking distances are 19 and 34 kilometers apart, compared to 12 kilometers and 18 kilometers normally, due to dried up water plants, the breakdown of boreholes, and resource-based conflicts. In Wajir and Garissa, trekking distances are within the monthly average of 11 kilometers and 18 kilometers due to relatively better recharge of water sources. Due to below average access to pasture and water, intra and inter-county livestock migrations persist as herders research and search for better pastures and water resources. Inter-county livestock migrations, therefore, have also been reported into atypically areas of Meru, Nakuru, Nyeri, Nyandarua, Laikipia, and Baringo counties, along with cross-border migrations into southern Ethiopia and even eastern Uganda. The unseasonably low availability of pasture and water and long trekking distances continues to drive the deterioration in livestock body conditions and productivity, thereby limiting household income, and purchasing power. Ladies and gentlemen, cattle body conditions are poor across the northern and northeastern pastoral livelihood zones. Through in Turkana, cattle body conditions are fair given ongoing rainfall. Goats body conditions across the pastoral livelihood zones are largely fair, but in Mandera and Marsabit, goat body conditions are poor. In July 2022, therefore, milk production was around 1 liter in most pastoral areas compared to around 2 liters normally. And however, in Marsabit, Samburu, and Turkana, where milk production was negligible due to low to no calving during the March-May long rains and the intensified migration that has left few milking herds around the homesteads. When considering the domestic water availability in the pastoral and marginal agricultural areas, household water availability remains low as most open water sources such as the seasonal rivers, water pans, and dams are relatively dried up. In the most pastoral areas, traditional river wells, shallow wells, and strategic boreholes are the major water sources. In these areas, ladies and gentlemen, the households return trekking distances in July are 8 to 15 kilometers compared to 2 to 8 kilometers normally, except in Isiolo, where distances were within the average of 4 kilometers. In the marginal agricultural areas, therefore, households return trekking the distances ranged between between 3 to 6 kilometers compared to the 5-year average of 2 to 6 kilometers. However, in Meru North, trekking distances are 20 kilometers compared to around 8 kilometers normally due to the drying up of the limited water sources. Overall, the long trekking distances for water take a lot of time, limiting household engagement in income earning opportunities along with other household activities. Water prices are above the 3-year average prices and range from 5 to 10 Kenyan shillings per litre compared to less than 5 Kenyan shillings normally in Lamu, Makueni, Taita Taveta, Turkana, Marsabit and West Pokot. However, water prices are between 10 to 20 Kenyan shillings in Mandera. As we move further to markets and trade, ladies and gentlemen, staple food prices remain significantly above average due to the low local supply or following and successive below average production seasons. High national demand as food and entertainment businesses recover following the relaxation of COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, coupled with high global prices that are driving high fuel and transportation costs, high inflation rates, and a lot of maize imports from typical international source markets such as Mexico and Ukraine. The above average prices in the presence of low income are reducing household food access and forcing households to rely on consumption and livelihood-based strategies to cover their food and non-food needs. Ladies and gentlemen, in July 2022 this year, the average wholesale maize prices in the urban reference markets were around 45 to 80% above the 5-year average, except in Eldoret, where prices are nearly 170% above the 5-year average. In the pastoral areas, maize retail prices are 25 to just over 70% above the 5-year average in most markets except in Baringo, Laikipia, West Pokot, and Samburu, where prices are 90 to almost 105% above the 5-year average. The prices were expected to remain high even though the national maize balance sheet will have a surplus of around 15 million shillings, equivalent to 90 kg bags by the end of October 2022, according to the Ministry of Agriculture. This includes approximately 2.4 million bags imported from East African region and 19.6 million bags from the long-range harvest crop in the medium and high potential production areas of Western Kenya and the South and North Rift, which lowered prices momentarily. Similarly, fellow Kenyans, wholesale bean prices were 20 to 50% above the 5-year average due to the reduced cross-border imports from Tanzania and Uganda, except in Eldoret, where bean prices were 10% below average, following the availability of rain production in the medium potential areas of Western Kenya. In the marginal agricultural areas, ladies and gentlemen, maize retail prices are over 90% above the 5-year average in most markets except in Nyeri, Kitui and Lamu, where prices are around 20 to 50% above average. The retail prices of beans are around 45 to 90% above the average in most markets except in Lamu, where the bean prices are 25% above average. The price of a medium-sized goat ranged from average in Isiolo and Marsabit, driven by fair body conditions following the March to May long rains. But goat prices are 7 to 39% below average across the remainder of the monitored markets. However, ladies and gentlemen, in Garissa, Tana River, and Laikipia, goat prices are around 10 to 15% above the 5-year average. Consequently, household food access to food measured using the proxy goat to maize terms of trade remains constrained by high stable prices and declining livestock prices. In July 2022, therefore, the sale of a goat can purchase 17 to 55 kg of maize, enough to feed a family of 6 to 4 to 20 days if the age was maize. However, in the northern and eastern pastoral markets, the goat to maize terms of trade are continuing to decline. Of particular concern are the terms of trade in Turkana, Samburu, Baringo, and Isiolo, where the sale of goat can only purchase enough maize to provide the equivalent of 2,100 kilocalories for 4 to 9 days if all a family ate was maize. Aside straight to pastoral areas outcomes, members of the press, according to the National Drought Management Authority Sentinel site data, about 13 to 47% of food pastoral households reported a poor financial cooperative system indicative of emergency outcomes, with just over 30 to nearly 60% of pastoral households reporting a borderline financial cooperative system indicative of crisis outcomes. An increase in number of households are recording a borderline financial cooperative system in most pastoral counties due to below average food consumption. Poor households are also engaging in coping strategies such as reducing the meal frequency and food portions, eating less preferred or less expensive foods, and sending household members to even eat elsewhere, which is very foreign character in our African norms. However, in Turkana and Marsabit, around 30 to 40% of households reported withdrawing children from school and reducing the expenses on health care due to low income and livestock productivity. Coping strategies typically indicative of crisis. In July 2022, an infection prevention and control acute malnutrition analysis recorded the critical proportions in Turkana West, Turkana Central, Samburu, Mandera, Wajir, Garissa, Baringo, and Marsabit, but extremely critical in Marsabit and Turkana, specifically in Turkana South and Turkana North, driven by reduced food and milk consumption, increased morbidity, and poor child care practices, in addition to structural issues such as poverty, high illiteracy levels, and poor infrastructure. Overall, declining goat to maize terms of trade and limited access to milk and income earning opportunities are driving high acute malnutrition rates and widespread emergency level outcomes. Ladies and gentlemen, according to July 2022, The National Drought Management Authority Sentinel site data, around 20 to 40% of poor households recorded a borderline food consumption score indicative of crisis. However, in Lamu and Meru North, around 50 and 70% of poor households recorded the borderline financial cooperative system, with around 16 and 26% of poor households recording also a poor financial cooperative system indicative of emergency. In order to cope, ladies and gentlemen, households across the marginal agricultural areas are reducing the number of meals consumed each day, limiting the portion sizes and consuming less preferred foods. The proportion of children under 5 years of age at risk of acute malnutrition, as measured by the mid-upper arm circumference, remains well below the 5-year average, except Makueni and Nyeri, where the proportion of children with a mid-upper arm circumference less than 135 millimeters, implying a 28% and 71% above the 3-year average. This is with significantly below average household food stocks, unseasonably low household incomes, and above average stable food prices. Most poor households are minimally meeting their food needs, but are unable to afford non-food expenditures without engaging in coping strategies that is indicative of stress. However, dear Kenyans, more than 20% of poor households in Meru North, Kitui, Makueni, and Tharaka Nithi are in crisis, as an increasing number of households are engaging in livelihood and consumption coping strategies, which is indicative of crisis to fill food consumption gaps and are reporting borderline food consumption scores. When dealing with the risk of famine analysis, in August 2022, the Famine Early Warning System Network should conduct a risk of famine analysis through January 2023 for the northwestern, northern, and northeastern pastoral livelihood zones in Kenya. Based on this analysis, however, the Famine Early Warning Systems Network does not assess a credible alternative scenario which famine will occur by January 2023 due to the critical availability of household income from labor and self-employment activities and government, as well as the humanitarian assistance. However, Famine Early Warning Systems in Kenya has to identify that maize prices, distributions of cash or food through the Hunger Safety Net program, as well as the humanitarian food assistance, and income for casual labor and self-employment need to be carefully monitored as the drought continues. In the most likely scenario, Kenyans, the start of the long rains harvest in Western Kenya is expected to relatively lower the maize prices as the harvest reaches local markets. Additionally, Hunger Safety Net program and humanities, as well as the fine arts, distributions are expected to continue at a minimum or be scaled up, since there are no indications that the pipeline break is imminent. Analysis, or rather in an alternative scenario, however, the health effects assessment outcome analysis identified that the concurrent worst worst case assumptions about these parameters will likely to lead to an increase in the number of households facing extreme food consumption caps indicative of catastrophe. Specifically, if maize prices were to increase by 33% in the northern pastoral livelihood zone, 24% in the northeastern pastoral livelihood zone, and 37% in the northwestern pastoral livelihood zone, if this were to occur alongside a 50% decline in household income from casual labor and self-employment, then the number of households facing the catastrophe will likely to increase. In another alternative scenario, if the delivery of hunger safety net program significantly declines, and if this were to occur alongside 50% decline in a typical household income from casual labor self-employment, then an increase in the number of households facing the catastrophe would likely to increase. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, paying attention to the projected outlook through the January 2023, in pastoral areas, the decline in the already below average forage and water resources is expected to intensify the livestock migration and drive remaining livestock herds to the dry season grazing areas, particularly until the start of the forecast below average October to December 2022 short rains, continuing the low livestock productivity and increasing in diseases and conflict incidences. The remaining milking herds left at the homesteads will likely to continue to produce little to no milk for consumption or sale. Households, however, will increasingly depend on livestock income sources like agricultural wage labor, safety nets, remittances, and charcoal, as well as firewood sales. This will likely to be constrained by limited labor opportunities and low wages driven by the high competition and a still recovering economy, which is also restricted by the ongoing drought, high global fuel prices, as well as the inflation. Driven by low terms of trade and low livestock productivity, the households will intensify the application of coping strategies, including reducing the number of meals and the portion sizes and sending the children to eat elsewhere, withdrawing children from school, reducing expenditures on health care, the sale of the last female animals, and dropping out of pastoralism as well. The emergency outcomes are expected across the northern and eastern pastoral counties through January 2023. In the marginal agricultural areas, households' food availability will remain significantly below average following the poor long rainy seasons harvest, driving an atypically high market dependency through at least January 2023. The forecast below average of October to December 2023 short rains are likely to result in below average agricultural labor opportunities as households face constrained access to seeds and other agricultural inputs, in addition to poor crop performance and above average staple food prices. Although households are likely to increase their reliance on other sources of income, such as the sale and production of charcoal and other off-farm income, this is unlikely to bridge income deficits and improve food access. As a result, poor households will continue to employ consumption-based coping strategies indicative of stressed and crises, such as reducing meal frequency, as well as food portions, eating less preferred foods, and relying on help from friends and relatives. Households are also likely to engage in livelihood coping strategies indicative of stress and crises, such as borrowing money, purchasing food on credit, and reducing expenses on health and veterinary services. Consequently, stress and crisis outcomes will likely to be sustained. Otherwise, it's with great and high expectations about the consideration from the respective cabinet secretaries in coordination with the county governors to make necessary immediate decisions in line with the earlier mentioned sectors to enable people to thrive in a sustainable and stress-free economic environment. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, it's with high dignity and high concern to conclude this, my thought with you this particular time. And my urge for the Kenyans is that let's unite together, let's stay in a sympathetic manner, in a way that we sympathize with the conditions of our next person. Otherwise, I wish you all the best in whatever you endeavor in your life, and also remember to pray for our nation, and also to pray for the success of our nation as well. Otherwise, I love you all.